I got involved because I wanted to speak out about my issues.
And physically, how did you get involved? How did you know about the group? Did
I
I
got-
invite you? I can't remember.
I got involved, I went along to this event, and an old worker called Julian was there, and she invited me along to the group.
Now, you have been a really active member in Inspire Highland for 4 years, a very active member, but you have come across barriers to your participation. Can you tell me something about how transport has been a barrier to you taking part in having your voice heard?
Barriers with transport have been that I have to get like a taxi or get picked up if I'm going to an event or something.
So, can you just describe how transport, if that didn't happen, if you had to take the bus, how that would be a barrier to you being part of Inspire Highland?
If I'd get the bus, then it'd be quite difficult because no one used to give me a seat, or I'd have difficulty scanning my card to get a ticket.
What are some of the other challenges you've experienced using buses in Highland?
Using buses in Highland, I have to guess which bus is going where and having to get on it.
And how does that make you feel? What's your feeling when you think I've got to get from A to B and I have to get the bus?
My feelings are that I get anxious because I wish it was just the bus that I got on, it would be the right one.
So can you just explain again, what do Inspire Highland do to stop transport being a barrier?
Inspire Highland help campaign about buses and transport so it can be a bit more accessible.
And what do we do in the project to enable, what do we do to help you get to meetings and to events?
To get to events, I get a taxi or get picked up.
So, would you say that physical barriers have been a problem? So, physically accessing buildings, has that been a barrier for you?
We went to this event, and it was like this hotel in Inverness, and it had we went down and into the dungeon, and it was really dark and it wasn't accessible at all. The event was organised by the Scottish Government and it wasn't accessible.
And how did that make you feel? Because you had to have a whole day there.
It made me feel a bit annoying because it should be accessible.
And why was that building not accessible to you?
It wasn't accessible to me because the steps were not that good at going on and the lighting wasn't that great.
And what happened at the Highland Youth Voice Conference that made it difficult for you, or impossible for you actually, to participate initially?
We went to this youth conference and the lighting wasn't that great, and we asked so many people to correct it and they wouldn't do it for most of the day.
And what was the problem with the lighting? How was it a barrier?
The problem was they wouldn't put them on.
It had those dim fairy lights?
Yeah, they had dim fairy lights.
And what did that mean for you?
It meant that it was not that easy to navigate around the room that we were in. My eye condition is called retinitis pigmentosus.
And how does that affect your vision?
It affects my vision with blurriness and shadows and night blindness. With the night blindness, it impacts me because I can't see anything at all. So if there was meetings in the afternoon, I wouldn't really be able to attend them.
So can you tell me something about in terms of how people communicate information to you? So for example, how they communicate emails to you or how they communicate texts to you, me included, that have been a barrier, that have made it difficult?
with people communicating with me emails, it's been a bit difficult because if they do a long email and then there's attachment, and then if people are commenting at the email, then I lose the attachment, and if it's long text, then it's quite hard to read.
So what instead do you need?
Instead, I would need it to be shorter text messages and the attachment on the emails to be separate to the comments from the other members.
There are also other things you need. So I remember putting something in a table to you once, which wasn't accessible.
I have problems with if there's text in tables because I use a software called Screen Reader and it won't be able to read it.
And has that been a barrier to you accessing information in the past?
Yes, it has been a barrier for me to get access to the work. So when we went to from face-to-face to digital, it was quite hard because I couldn't access the email by myself. I'd have to get someone to put me onto Zoom, which what we were using when we do it digitally.
And what was done to overcome that?
What was done to overcome it, I got a screen reader and that helped me to access the digital access myself.
And what about also when you come into a Zoom meeting or an online meeting? What can be a real barrier because you can't see people? So what's the barriers to you coming on to a meeting and you don't know who's on the meeting?
The barriers coming on to a meeting is that if someone doesn't say who's in the meeting, then I don't know who they are, but then if someone does, then that is helpful.
How accessible is Teams for you?
Teams isn't that accessible because the screen reader isn't able to access it, but it can on Zoom.
You've had, I don't know if you want to do this or not, but you've had two occasions where you've actually been in tears because Teams was such a barrier to you. Do you feel able to maybe just explain that and what happened and how you felt? Because it's so powerful. But if you don't want to go there, don't.
Okay. So there's been 2 times that I haven't been able to access Teams properly, and it's made me upset because I wanted to join the meeting, but I couldn't access to put the camera on or put my microphone on because the screen reader wouldn't work on Teams.
What was the impact on that for you? How did it make you feel?
The impact was that I felt like I was left out and I couldn't join the meeting. So I'm a board member as part of Inspiring Young Voices, and the barriers are that it's always on Zoom and I don't really know anything about the people that join the Zoom call, and when they send out the attachment it goes missing because people comment on the same email.
So what do our board need to do better?
The board needs to do better by separating the attachment, doing it separate, but still letting me see the comments from the other members. What would make it easier in the board meetings would be if I could get introduced to the people that are coming into the Zoom call.
And what about also about meeting them face to face at times you mentioned?
When I've met them face to face, it's been nice because then you get to know them, but on Zoom you don't really get to know them. In Inspire Highland they have other groups, and I asked if we could create a group called I Inspire to talk about sight loss.
And why did you feel that you needed a particular mini meeting to look at sight loss issues?
I thought we should have a mini meeting to talk about sight issues because there's not really many groups around.
And what kind of issues do you talk about within I Inspire?
The issues we talk about is transport, menus, stuff that goes on around your daily life.
Can you just describe something about your experience of going into cafes when we have meetings? What's been difficult actually going into cafes when we have meetings, and about the menus?
When we've had meetings in cafes, some have been quite nice. One lady came up to the table and read some of the menu out to us, but other cafes haven't been that great. We have to go up to the till and order the stuff.
And how does that make you feel? Is that the best way of doing it, or is there another way that they could do it?
It's not the best way to do it. There could be another way they could do it.
What could they do?
They could have an accessible menu or come to the table like that one did.
You mentioned earlier that trust with the staff is really important. Can you just explain about what you mean?
So trust with the workers in Inspire Highland is that you get to know them and you feel safe with them, so you could go to an event with them.
And so there's something about when we were saying about outside that yes, you have a long-term relationship with me, so there's trust there because you know me. But equally, you said you met Penny once.
The new worker was supportive because she just guided me about and helped me.